Okay, so we all play trombone, except for
I do play trombone.
You play more. Ryan plays trombone too. So Ryan here in the tuba studio. He's in my trombone pedagogy class. Invited him here as well. But here we have trombones and lots of different kinds of trombones. So many of you were here last year for this session, but there are a number of new instruments since then. I don't think anything new since the summer when you were working here with the summer music program. But I want to go through a number of things just as we get started. I'm going to wear gloves because that's what we do when we handle old stuff. And although I will play some of these instruments, one of the nice things about the Sue's Archives and Center for American Music is that apart from a exhibit from time, a rotating exhibit in here, and a few things, most of the center's collection is not under glass, like in most museums. The instruments that are part of this collection are alive. That is, they can be taken out, they can be handled, they can be played, they can be studied, not just looked at through glass where they're dead. And so a number of these instruments came from my own personal collection that I donated to the center last year. And I have intention to donate a number of other instruments that I have when I'm done having my fun with them. But I thought of all the places in the world where I could give some of my important historical instruments, I thought this is the place where I want them to live. And it also ensures that I'll continue to have a wonderful association with the University of Illinois going forward, as I had even before I joined the faculty for these 2 years. So what we have here are a number of things, and I'll just step over here. We have several tenor trombones on this table, plus one alto trombone. We have a few valve tenor trombones and 4 bass trombones over here. So I'm not going to go in any particular chronological order, but let's just take interesting things as they come. So we'll start with this Holton Special trombone. You can see it's gold plated with what we call a satin finish, and then the engraving is high gloss here. This over here. And inside, ongoing gold wash bell. So this was early 20th century, made by Frank Holton Company in Chicago. And he later moved to Elkhorn, Wisconsin. Now there are a number of distinctive features about this as an early 20th century trombone. So some of you in lessons I've shown you a photograph of Johannes Rochu's trombone mouthpiece with his narrow bore trombone made by Lefebvre in France that he brought over to the United States in 1925 when he joined the Boston Symphony Orchestra as principal trombone. That instrument was only just a little bit larger than this. In fact, just about the same size. Here we have a trombone that's probably about a 460, 475 bore. Now your modern tenor trombones are 0.547 inches and bass trombones 0.562 or a little larger. This is probably about, Rochu's trombone was 547, that's trumpet bore. And his trombone was 6 inches. I think that's about what this bell is here. And a very, very small mouthpiece. Now, Rochu's mouthpiece was smaller than this. But this is, it says right on here, Frank Holton, #1. And Frank Holton was a trombone player, fine trombone player. And so just look at this mouthpiece. And what does it remind you of when you see the contour and the size?
Horn.
Yeah, like a French horn mouthpiece, right? This funnel, kind of funnel shape. And so this is, by today's standards, this is not like your 5G, right? Now, let's remember something. Going back to Rochu's trombone from France, that was the trombone that Bolero was written for. Something narrow bore and small like this. And today we struggle on our big 547 bore trombones with our 5G or 4G mouthpieces, trying to get up to this D flat. And we wonder why it's such a difficult struggle. Well, when you play it on a trombone like this, there's no struggle. Because this is what it was meant for. Okay, a number of distinctive features with this. So, trombone, as we know, only has 3 parts. So the bell does not go on with a lock nut, but it's a friction fit. So the invention of the lock nut in the first third of the 20th century was a welcome addition. So your trombone does not just fall apart. There's no slide lock on this instrument. That was another invention of the early 20th century. We have a water key, standard water key, looks very much like yours. We have the finial on the bottom and the protective plate here. There is a tuning slide up here. The tuning slide, it's straight in, straight out. So both ends of the movable slide are male, going to the female parts of the main horn. Today, manufacturers tend to reverse this tube so that when we blow air through the horn, it doesn't have the turbulence of hitting the end of this tuning slide in here. It just will blow freely into there. Look at the engraving. This was done by hand. And there are Shire's, when Shire's company was initially established, he did have his instruments hand engraved. And in fact, the instrument that I use here, that's in my office, that I play duets with, was engraved by the same engraver that Steve Shire's used when he first started marketing his trombones. So this is what here, this little L-shaped piece of metal here, this is what's called a gusset. Give a little extra strength to this very dangerous part of the instrument as we grip and we pull back. Now, some of you, I've talked to you about how to hold the trombone. You know, we were all taught, you know, you put 3 fingers under the brace, thumb over the main brace, index finger up by the mouthpiece. But you can see the problem here is that there's very little room here. And this is going to result in the pinch here. So I hold my horn, and if you were holding this horn, you'd have to hold this horn with only two fingers underneath, no matter how small your hands are, so you didn't get pinched, which ergonomically shifts the center of gravity of the horn back a little bit, because our horns are always very front heavy. So, beautiful instrument by Frank Holton, who, you know, we don't think of Frank Holton today, the Holton Company, as being a big player on the trombone manufacturing scene. Of course, the company's been bought and sold so many times. But in the early 20th century, Holton and Kahn vied for supremacy in instruments. Kahn won out, but the Holton instruments were very fine. This instrument also has stockings on the bottom, so you can see these are not plated. They look copper. Holton was always experimenting, so these were added on. So these are additional pieces of metal that were then soldered onto the end of the slide. Whereas today, what we have is a rate. We have the tube and it's flared open. So and the purpose of this is so the entire length of the slide does not come in contact with the entire length of the outer slide, which would cause huge amount of friction. And then this allows then for you to put oil, and oil would have been used at this time, oil on the slide for it to move smoothly.
Can we hear it?
Sure. Let me get my little mouthpiece. Now, this here. Now, keep in mind, the Berlioz Symphony Fantastique, okay, famously has pedal B flats for the second and third trombone. Berlioz never wrote, I shouldn't say never, he only wrote for the bass trombone in one piece, his Funeral and Triumphant Symphony. So he was always writing for a section of 3 tenor trombones, including in the Symphony Fantastique. And so when you think about it, he would have been using a trombone section would have had horns this size. And so when you think about the sound, when you play this fortissimo, it's a sound that can wake the dead, which is exactly what Berlioz wanted. Not especially pleasant, but that's what he was interested in the March to the Scaffold. So this instrument has marked on it here the letters LP, low pitch. The standardization of pitch, which you can read about in my dictionary that you have. If you go to the entry on pitch, standardization of pitch around the world didn't happen until the Treaty of Versailles that ended World War I. And there's a small paragraph in the Treaty of Versailles that got applied to the standardization of pitch around the world. So there was high pitch and low pitch. Low pitch was what we have generally today, about A equals 440. but that was a relatively new thing. High pitch was more in vogue, and that is an A452, almost a half step higher. And so trombones were unique among instruments because whether it was high pitch or low pitch, we could still play our horns. Positions are all different, but we could still do it. Many instruments, including trombones, had additional tuning slides, which were longer or shorter, that you could go back and forth with. Okay, sticking with tenor trombones for the moment.
So why did you change your mouthpiece when you played?
I'm using my own mouthpiece.
Oh, okay.
So, first of all, many of these mouthpieces are not plated, and so it's raw brass, and raw brass can, for some people, including me, if I play raw brass for too long, my embouchure kind of hardens up. It's an allergy thing that's pretty common for people. So that's why, and plus it's more comfortable. Okay, here we have an instrument by an American maker, Kiefer, Williamsport, Pennsylvania. Again, another early 20th century instrument. And this is the Gardel Simons model. Famous trombone soloist. We tend to think of Arthur Pryor as the great trombone soloist. Well, he wasn't alone. Frank Holton was a fine trombone soloist. Gardel Simons, Leo Zimmerman, they're legion. Pryor wasn't the only one. This is an interesting mouthpiece. It says on it, Kiefer Simons. Gardel Simons wrote a piece called Atlantic Zephyrs, which was a required solo when I was auditioning for Allstate in one of my high school years. So, okay, and here we have several features. First of all, LP is low pitch, no tuning slide here. This is a tuning slide here, what we call tuning in slide, or TIS. And if you read about tuning in slide in my dictionary, you'll see I have drawings of 3 different kinds of tuning in slide. Tuning in slide typically would be here at the top. Sometimes it's down at the bottom. What this does is, and I'm going to take the outer slide off. You can see another very long stocking at the end here. And again, this is also a friction fit here. And I love this counterweight, kind of a bat wing, right? You didn't know Batman played the trombone. So tuning and slide, there are two set screws here. And so you can then pull the slide up.
Whoa.
Okay, so there's an additional length of tubing here, and then once you find where you want, you put both set screws to keep it in place. A little more complicated than our tuning slide, and tuning slides began to come into trombones and other instruments in the late 19th century. But some people, even some manufacturers today, continue to make trombones tuning slides. Some people think it has some kind of advantage. It's lost on me, and it does make it heavier. Yes, exactly right. Standard water key down here, finial on the bottom. This has a little rubber nipple on the bottom here. Okay, so put the key for it.
Is this the one that you don't use to the center?
No, I'll get to those. I'll let you know. A little bit larger board than the Holton. Slide it obviously needs to be worked, but important to the storm. American made, Williamsport, Pennsylvania. And it also came, this instrument, this is for the Kiefer, yes, Scott?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. This oil container. So I have an article coming out in the summer International Trombone Association journal about the history of trombone oil and a chemical analysis, because people of my generation remember valve oil, trombone slide oil. Most of you use probably, what's your slide lubricant of choice?
Yamaha.
Yamaha. It dominates the market. Yeah. Almost 60% of the market is Yamaha. And then slide and mix, trombotine, a few other things. And I think point something percent.
Trombone in 6th grade.
Okay. So oil was messy. And I begin my article talking about the sad lament of mothers who, would say to to their trombone playing children, what have you done to your trousers or your shirt? Because you put oil on the slide and you're moving the slide and it will spray back on you. So here, Kiefer's got a little receptacle here where you unscrew this and put oil in, and then you could tip the oil onto your slide. Holton later made bottles of valve oil, and I have a dozen bottles of historical valve oil, trombone slide oil that I had analyzed for this article, with various different kinds of applicators. Things that look kind of like a Q-tip, squirt bottles, but most of them are just open bottles. You would just take the open bottle and just dump some on, and most of it would go on the floor. Interesting little innovation here. Frank Olds, Los Angeles, another tuning and slide. So again, friction fit, no tuning slide up here, tuning a slide, slightly different kind of configuration. Standard water key, very, very narrow board. Now there's a bark. Okay, you can do something with this instrument you can't do with your modern instrument. You can play loudly on our modern instrument, but you can't do that. Question is, would you want to? Stockings on the end. Not this is not lacquered. This is raw brass. The whole thing. Very, very small, very narrow, fantastic. If only my symphony colleagues would stop thinking that somehow or other to use a bigger trombone makes them more macho. You know, those of you taking my trombone pedagogy class know that the chapter that I wrote in the book is, with the right tool you can do any job. So it's a call to use instruments that are appropriate for the repertoire. So when you play bolero, play a small bore trombone, play a King 2B or a 3B. It's going to sound amazing, except people think, well, everyone's going to think I'm a wimp. Who cares? Are you going to serve the music or your Facebook page? You know, I mean, it doesn't matter. Okay, what matters is how great it sounds. All right, so here we have a Kahn 16H alto trombone. So this E flat alto trombone. Now just take a look at this mouthpiece. It says Kahn alto. It's like a trumpet mouthpiece, little larger. Okay, a little larger inside diameter than a trumpet. Kahn put their serial numbers all over the place. They put them on the bell section. They put them on the top part of the inner slide. They put them on the outer slide, and they put them on the water key, on the back side of the water key. Which, let's remember, is not a spit valve, because there's very little spit that goes into the horn as we play. It's condensation from our lungs, which is mostly what's in there. Okay, so here we have an alto trombone. It has a slide lock. The first slide locks by Kahn were not on the upper tube where we know them, but they were on the bottom tube. And if you look at early Kahn catalogs, you see trombones with this new feature, the slide lock, on the bottom, and then it was moved to the top. Again, friction fit between the bell and the slide sections. This slide looks very nicely. I don't play alto trombone, but low E flat. Okay, thank you. One of maybe 4 times in my life I've actually tried to play an alto trombone. Let's have a tuning slide in the top here.
What's your favorite of the ones from here?
We have not yet gotten to it. While I love all these historical tenor trombones, there are a few other things that I think are particularly special. Before we get to the bass trombones, I want to cover the valve trombones. Now, we think of the trombone as the slide trombone, and so it was at its beginning. And the trombone has, as one of its many advantages, is almost exactly the same as it was when it was invented in the 15th century. Moving slide, you move with your right hand, hold the bell in your left hand, and you have a mouthpiece. And so in its basic configuration, it has not changed. It's changed in its construction methods, in its bore size, in the materials used to manufacture it, but the basic concept is still there. And it's unlike most other instruments. Trumpets originally did not have valves, neither did horns. Clarinets originally didn't have so many keys. Flutes were made of wood with very few keys. We have pretty much our pure instrument, and the trombone is considered to be a pure instrument in that there's nothing impeding the flow of the air. The invention of the valve in the early 19th century changed everything. It made for fully chromatic brass wind instruments, before which time the trombone was the only fully chromatic brass wind instrument. Instruments could only play notes of one overtone series at a time. And so trumpet and horn players would change out various crooks. So you had one crook that put the instrument in B flat, and another one that put it in C, another one in D, another one in E flat. And composers knew this. And so when you look at the parts for Beethoven, Haydn, Mozart symphonies for trumpet and horn, he's writing for those instruments in various keys, but the composer has to leave time for the player to get the crook out and get the new crook in. Oh, and by the way, also then turn it over several times and empty out the condensation, because the water key had not yet been thought of. Just think of the things that we take for granted. The slide lock, the water key, the lock nut between the bell and the slide. We just take this for granted. Wouldn't you like to have been the person who just discovered to do that? I don't know. Am I crazy? Am I the only one? Maybe you do though too. Wish you were at various moments in history, even for just a minute.
I was talking about how I wanted to bring an Apple Watch to like the Roman Empire. I was watching Lightyear last
Would have
night.
no service.
I was like, what if I was actually on like an Apple Watch? They'd go feral.
I would have invent the wheel.
I think they'd make you emperor if you had that. But when I have that self-conversation, I think, who decided the slide lock? Was it a matter of necessity? Did someone drop the trombone slide in a parade?
It's a middle school band class.
Okay, and somebody just decided it's time. We've got to figure this out. Or the lock nut. How many times would the bell section just kind of flop over on your hand? Or the water key. Before the water key, with the slide trombone, you have to take the thing off and dump it upside down. Get it out. So, and composers would have to plan for that. Okay, the invention of the valve changed everything. Why would we add valves to a trombone, which is, quote, a perfect instrument, can play perfectly well in tune? Because people were lazy. People were lazy. Yeah, not a bad answer there, Ethan. Not a bad answer. Yeah, so with the valve, several things. Then the trombone doesn't get larger, and we know that our instrument, our noble instrument, is one of only a few, another one being the accordion, that changes size as we play it. Okay, we're not counting violin bows. The bow doesn't change size. Okay, you just move it back and forth. But the trombone changes shape as you move the slide in and out. But with valves, with a valve instrument, you don't have the slide. Now this allows for a number of things. If you have a valve instrument in B flat, as our trombones are, and you have a valve instrument in E flat, say like tenor horns or alto horns, and the parts are written in those transposed keys, I can put a B flat trombone in the hands of a alto horn player, and they can play just fine, assuming they can cope with the mouthpiece, because the fingerings are all the same. One's instrument's in E flat, one's in B flat, but if you're reading transposed music, the fingerings are the same. Likewise, if you have a band and you've got way too many cornet players in your brass band, you say, okay, here's a trombone. A slide trombone would be impossible for that person to deal with. But the valve trombone, just pick it up and play it. Now, take a look at this. Here we have another con. This is a con tenor mouthpiece. How small this is. Now, has a water key, has tuning in slide at the very bottom. This is a tuning slide down here. Pull that down. Each of the three valves has its own tuning slide. And we have a wing nut here. Okay, this is a wing nut right here to tighten the bell section to the valve section. And let's see, it says what this is on it in terms got?
It's just low pitch.
Tighter sound, stuffier sound because of the valves. Of course, this horn probably hasn't been worked on to improve its valve action in a very, very long time. There's a holder here for a lyre, so would have been suitable for a marching band, and exciting. Gold wash bell, satin finish. If this was cleaned up, it would be satin finish, and then the engraving would be high gloss, and then gold inside. Real beautiful.
Why were the bells so much smaller back then? Like, when did they start becoming larger?
Yeah, the larger bells, larger bores came in Germany in the last third of the 19th century, and this is where we have this here. This is where we have nomenclature problems with what we call instruments, right? So we had the tenor trombone, and then when bore sizes started getting larger in Germany, the large bore tenor trombone was called the tenor bass trombone, the tenor bass posaune. But it didn't yet have the F attachment, which was not invented until 1839. It was called the court ventil. Court meaning the fourth, the ventil meaning valve, so it's a valve that makes the instrument go down a fourth. And we call it the F attachment. So for a B flat trombone, the court ventil. For a trombone in G, the court ventil would be in D. So the bore sizes increased, the valve sizes increased, the mouthpiece sizes increased, and then we run into this whole sticky thing in Germany of what we call an instrument. Because later, the tenor bass posaune came to be the large bore tenor trombone with an F attachment, not a bass trombone. The bass trombone, of course, as what we've talked about in previous classes, was not in B flat. The old bass trombone was an F, very, very large instrument with a handle on it. Gradually, trombone section coalesced to all instruments in B flat, just distinguished only by their bore sizes. Now, this alto trombone, by the way, we should just say here, we've talked about it in trombone literature class and a bit in trombone pedagogy. So we think today about the alto trombone, small trombones, alto, tenor, bass, contrabass, and also soprano smaller than the alto. And there's a big discussion going on about, well, today people tend to think that the alto trombone has always been used. And that, for instance, Beethoven symphonies, they're written in alto, tenor, and bass clef. But clef is not an indicator of the instrument that was used. And so when we look at pieces like the Albertsberger Concerto and the Wagensaal Concerto, which typically people like to play on alto trombone, we have a problem with them, and that is that the trills don't work on an E-flat alto trombone, but they do work on a B-flat trombone. And so there is a very persuasive case that's been made by my friend Howard Weiner, a musicologist and trombonist in Germany, through his research, that the alto trombone was not a specific kind of instrument for long periods of history. That when we had these narrow bore instruments, it was the mouthpiece and the bore size of the instrument that made something an alto trombone, a tenor trombone, or a bass trombone. Then when bore sizes began getting larger in the 19th century, the small trombone began to make a comeback. So that is a topic that needs a lot of discussion that we don't have time for today. But things are not always as they seem to our modern ears. We look at alto trombone. Now, Lorraine, you have an alto, and Peter, you have an alto. Anybody else have an alto trombone? Okay, Lorraine, does yours have a valve? Lorraine's alto trombone has a trill valve, which is terrific. It allows you to do the trills that you can't do.
On consignment.
No, and it works great. The only thing is that there were no trill valves on historical alto trombones. It's a modern concession to solve a problem that isn't a problem if it's played on a B-flat trombone. But then again, manufacturers want to sell alto trombones, so there you go. Okay, now that was a piston valve trombone. This is a rotary valve trombone. It's not in good repair. This is one of the instruments that I donated last year. So this is by Lyon and Healy, Chicago. So a number of things with this. There's no water key. it's 3 rotary valves. There's yeah, you just turn it upside down. So this just goes into here. Friction fit, not really friction. I mean, there's really nothing holding it together there. Very large flat brace is what's called a pigtail loop. See pigs with their little curly tails. So this would have been held like this, and the middle valve paddle is off, although we have a reproduction of it in the case. Someday we have this restored. The valves are not connected to their linkages, but so valve instrument. Now this is one of several. I'll pull up another one here.
Where'd you get that from?
There's 3 valve trombones here that were actually given to me by Dean Michael Wilder, Dean of the Conservatory of Music at Wheaton College. And Dean Wilder's father had collected some instruments that just caught his fancy. He didn't play trombone, caught his fancy. And these 3 valve trombones here were part of Dean Wilder's collection. And when his father died, he had all these instruments, and he asked, would I like to have it? I said, of course, I'll find a home for it. Well, I did. The Sousa Archive and Center for American Music, because this is where horns like this need to live. So, this is by Lyon, this is
I want to say something that the valve design on the Lyon and Healy is really interesting because it's not a common design. If you look at the underside and see how the thread is put into it, it's an internal mechanism, very unlike many of the rotary valves of the 19th century. So I am absolutely intrigued by the valve structure.
Yeah, so, and if we get this thing restored, it'd be fascinating to see how it would be string, be string linkage on here, right? It would be fascinating to see what you'd have to do to make that work. So this has a plate on it, a badge, Lyon and Healy, Chicago. And this instrument here says Champion Silver Piston, Chicago. I can't put this one together because it's not, as you can see, it's got some braces that have come off, pieces here. But this is, but yeah, exactly. Very, very small. Now, you see here, it's got, this is what we call ferrules. Where a brace is connected to the body of the instrument. And so these ferrules, they look like they're beautifully engraved. They're not. They were actually rolled metal and then cut and put on here. But they're beautiful, and there's some other instruments that have even more beautiful ones. So here we have standard water key, standard 3 piston valves. Okay, so it says on here, this brand, Champion Silver Piston Chicago. Here's one, a valve trombone. What's the first thing you notice about this instrument? Look at its color. Somebody painted it, right? It's blue, right? So maybe this was for like a Masonic band. Or what color do you see? So
Looks like it's plastic
It looks
silver.
like a matte silver.
yeah, here's silver and here's the painted. And so it's chipped off down here and you see the raw brass. So somebody got an idea, paint the instrument.
Oh,
Whatever floats your boat. Oh, it's probably first third of the 20th century.
That was me in the 6th grade when I wanted a silver instrument.
Okay.
I was ready to paint
It's
over
just
it.
this artist grade Carl Fisher. Please. Now, what all 3 of these instruments have in common is that we have no idea who actually manufactured them. Carl Fisher didn't manufacture trombones. Neither did Lyon and Healy. Neither did Champion
The clothing
Silver Piston Chicago. Instruments like this are what we call stencil brand instruments. Most of them were made in Europe, Eastern Europe, very cheaply, many in the Czech Republic, the old Czechoslovakia, imported to America, and then any dealer or distributor could put their own name on the instrument and sell it and market it as their own.
so are these like good instruments?
No, these are not. Good question.
Are they just old?
No, these are not especially artist quality. This may have some quality to it if we can get it restored. All of these instruments have great quality, great values, production values to them. These would have been seen as inexpensive instruments for weekend warriors, students, town band, whatever, not necessarily symphonic.
Okay, but I want to be very clear about this. Essentially, they're not artist horns, but, band was a big deal. Every community had it, all right? And it was just part of their identity. And most of the musicians couldn't afford these high-end horns. And so you have this market that the companies are working with. And then starting in 1920 with the school band movement, we're just, we don't have a lot of high-level musicians who want to buy lots of artist-grade instruments. So the manufacturers, okay, our market share is pretty narrow here. But we got a bunch of sixth-grade kids that need trombones, and they don't have to be great. And we'll just crank them out to give them a horn to play with. I mean, so,
It's the Mendini trombone of 1915.
I know.
Oh,
It's like our version of like kids being like, I want like the Kevin Durant 9 basketball shoes. Perfect. They
This
got
is
it.
the archives that have my piece here.
Well, and this is something that's interesting, is that my feeling is that young players need better instruments than professionals.
Yeah.
Because I can play anything. As you can see, I can play any of these instruments. Okay, and I can still sound like me. Okay, it's not, my sound is on a bass trombone, fine. But kids, they need instruments that work. And I remember doing battle years ago when we lived in Boston. One of my youngest daughter's friends had a baritone horn, 3-valve baritone, that they were renting to buy. And they were within 2 payments of finishing it off. And the girl's mother said, should I finish paying this off and keep this? And I took the instrument, and it was absolute junk. It was junk. It was absolute garbage. And I knew the dealer that was the music store that was renting it. I knew the head of the music store right near Symphony Hall in Boston. And I took the instrument in, and I started off as nicely as I could. I said, this is not a very good quality instrument. This friend of my daughter's, they paid a lot. They paid way too much for this. And, oh no, this is a beautiful quality. No, this is junk. No, this is not junk. This is garbage, okay? This is criminal what you're doing in renting this instrument, because she's having a hard time playing in tune because this is junk. And we got in it, okay? And things got very, very quiet in the front of the music store while he and I were going in, and we were really going, you've never seen me lose my temper. But my sense of justice was so offended. And I finally got him to, I said, I'm not leaving here until you admit that this is junk. I finally got him to admit it was junk. And I said, okay, and I'm walking out of here with a 3-valve Yamaha euphonium. Okay? You got one over there. That's what I'm walking out with to give to this young girl, and she'll finish the payments. And I did. Okay? And I went to bat for a 6th grader on that. But I felt so strongly that these young kids, because why do they quit?
Yeah.
Kids quit all the time, not because they can't learn the finger or something, but the instrument doesn't even give them a chance.
So me to call you when I'm negotiating with music shops.
Yeah.
Remember when I buy a car?
Did you know?
Well, look, fool me, fine. You fool little kids, that's not cool. That's a power imbalance there, and that is not cool.
Did you know this girl?
Oh yeah. She was a friend of my daughter.
Oh.
Yeah. And
Does she still have it?
I don't know. Siobhan must be 41 now. So. Okay, so I want to move to bass trombones and then an extraordinary instrument. So here we have an instrument that was part of my collection. This has a really wonderful history.
That one's fun to play.
Yeah, this is a trombone made by Schmidt. The engraving on it says C.F. Schmidt. It's made in Berlin after Weimar as a serial number. Carl Fisher in New York, sole agent of America with a K, Canada. So this was made just before the First World War. Schmidt is very well known as a maker of French horns, but Schmidt trombones are actually very rare. This instrument was owned by my predecessor in the Boston Symphony Orchestra, Calco Kahila. He went by Coco. He played bass trombone in the BSO from 1952 to 1972. This instrument was actually owned by his teacher. He went to school in Boston in the New England Conservatory. His teacher was Hans Dirk Waldemar Lillebach. Lillebach was Danish, Coco was Finnish. Lillebach played bass trombone in the Boston Symphony until Boston Symphony and the Cleveland Orchestra engaged in a trade of two players. So John Coffey had been in the Cleveland Orchestra and Lillebach was in Boston, and they flipped orchestras. Well, the union wasn't happy about that. There was no audition, and there was several years went on, and there were all sorts of problems, and in the end, Coffey had to leave the Cleveland Orchestra, and Lillebach had to leave the Cleveland Orchestra. Coffey had to leave the Boston Symphony. Coffey set up a music shop, Coffey Music, COFFEY, Coffey Music in Boston, right near Symphony Hall. Had an amazing reputation as a teacher. Lillebach unfortunately didn't do so well. He ended up dying homeless in New York City on the streets. So this instrument was Lillebach's, then to Kahila, and then Kahila gave it to me. And I use this on many concerts with the BSO because it's just so interesting. So several things. First of all, there's no tuning slide on the instrument, except it's not an F attachment, it's an E attachment. So the first valve, it's E. The instrument is friction fit, so no retaining nut here. You can see this part of the hand slide has been chrome plated because you can see on the outer slide right there, you can see plating coming off. Now, there's several really interesting things about this instrument. First of all, you can see it has a very long water key. Secondly, there's no stocking. This is entirely touching the inside of the outer slide.
You played this at a professional gig?
Oh yeah, I played Rhyme Symphonies on
And
this.
you just pull down the trigger with your.
Yes.
It's like a.
Yes, a couple of things. So there's no stocking, but the slide has this.
So this is a quality instrument.
Super high quality.
Mm-hmm.
This goes back and forth. This is not soldered. So the outer slide will ride on the inner slide. It will ride over imperfections, dents.
Mm-hmm.
This slide actually works very well. It's very heavy. It's a very, very heavy slide, very light bell. Now, the F attachment, or the E attachment, and this is a German shank mouthpiece made by Time that I use on my German trombones. So you put your finger in here in the strap, and there's a spring up here, and so this is how you do it. So you don't support the trombone by the brace here like we do. And this instrument, in the case when Coco gave it to me, had several leather straps of different lengths. So it's depending on the size of your hand. But
Also the size of your thumb, because
Yeah.
they're
this
they're
is
a couple-
huge.
yeah.
This is a very, very large bell also. Fourth Symphony. So it just, to me, it has a very beautiful sound. It's a warm sound. German trombones, very difficult. It's very easy to get a half valve here. That's about as loud as I can play on it, and the sound doesn't break up. Contrast to the small bore horns, the sound that can wake the dead. This is a very different thing. It's about as loud as I can get on it. So it's just got an extremely, extremely warm sound. So I'm very happy for this one.
Hey, the slide is of all the horns, the slide is just stunning how smooth it moves.
And with no stockings.
Yes.
Okay, now we move to two contrabass trombones.
That's the first slide.
So this instrument is by Kahn. This is owned by the center here. It's a Kahn contrabass trombone
like a
mouthpiece.
beefcake.
So this is like what?
It's a beefcake.
Yeah, this is a double B flat trombone. Okay, so it's your trombone with twice as much tubing. Okay, no valve on it. Look at this. Look at the water key. It's one thing for two holes because you have two slides. Okay, it does have a slide lock, single slide lock, and so there are two tubes that go back and forth. Very heavy here, Now, this was the country-bass trombone that Wagner asked to be invented for his ring cycle operas. So he was interested in increasing several families of instruments. So the trombone was scored for 3 tenor bass trombones, that is trombones with epitatrons, and 1 bass trombone that doubles with the contrabass trombone. So some people are under the misconception that the 4th trombone part in Wagner's main operas should be played on this. That's not true. It's a doubling part. Note to self, do not try to play the Divide of the Valkyries on this. Okay? It's not friendly or even possible. Okay? What happens is with this instrument, with the length of the tubing, it's a very unstable instrument. And that's getting down to low F. And now F here. Because remember, the overtone series is shifted. It's double the length. So we have pedal B flat, F, and we get very squirrely when we get up there. Slide's very, very heavy. There are stockings on this, but it's extremely unwieldy. And this is one of the reasons why then the contrabass trombone morphed from this to the sort of the modern contrabass trombone in F that we know. So put this down for a minute because let's look at something else. So here's the B flat. This is larger bore than a bass trombone.
It kind of starts getting into that like tuba intonation almost.
Yeah, but it's all cylindrical bore, and that's the problem. The instrument is too big. It's too long for a cylindrical bore to have a successful holding the timbre together. Now, here's an instrument that I donated last year. Here's another contrabass trombone. But what do you see that's different about this right away?
A lot.
Smaller. It's much smaller. Okay? We have much smaller bore size. This instrument was made by the Salvation Army in the early 20th century in London. As far as I know, there were only about 5 of these made. This came to me via a band member in the New England Brass Band that I conducted for 10 years, from 1998 to 2008. This instrument was used in bands in England and in the United States, and very rare. And I thought the center here was just the right place for it. But remember the B flat we just had, but this one's at high pitch. So instead of A440, this is at A452. Okay? So it's about a half step different. Slide actually works remarkably well, but it's incredibly heavy. It also has this snake tongue water key, which is just so fantastic. Beautiful rolled ferrules and throughout the entire instrument, all over the place. It's got doesn't have a gold wash bell, just the standard Salvation Army stamp here, made in Judd Street in England. I've been to the Salvation Army Museum. They have some wild looking instruments there.
They produced ones.
It did. Salvation Army was one of the largest maker of musical instruments in the world.
Really?
Because up until only recently, and when I say recently, maybe the last 40 years, if you played in a Salvation Army band, you had to use a Salvation Army made instrument. Well, they had a complete monopoly over their bands. And so Salvation Army is a church denomination. We know them mostly for their humanitarian work and disasters and things, ringing the bells at Christmas time. Please give. They do a lot of good to help a lot of people. But Salvation Army churches, they use brass bands for their service music. Now today, many of them have gone contemporary, so they use guitars and all that kind of stuff too. But there's a tremendous repertoire of music for British style brass band, which is cornets, flugelhorn, alto horns in E flat, baritones, and euphoniums, a distinction, 3 trombones, including bass trombone, E flat tubas, B flat tubas, and percussion. There's a tremendous amount of repertoire for these bands. They're high quality, superb composers.
Is that a small shape?
This is a very small shape mouthpiece right here. Yeah, this is a mouthpiece that I use when I play bass trumpet. So this is my rim, my large rim, going down to a 6.5 AL cup and throat. So it allows me to play small bore instruments without completely messing up the embouchure. Okay,
But it was Purna, I mean, stuffier in terms of playing when you played it last
Yeah.
fall. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
it's a
certainly it's stuffy.
Yeah.
Because again, the length, the cylindrical length. You know, if you're going to make an instrument that long, you need a tuba. You need conical bore. That is gradually increasing bore size throughout. There's another bass trombone here. That was a uniquely British thing. This is the bass trombone in G. This is made by Besson, also London.
Oh, it's got the thingy.
It's the thingy. Ethan says it's the thingy. It's the handle. This is a bass trombone in G. So you say, why? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. Okay. So you'll see the entry for G bass trombone in here. The G bass trombone has a long history in England, and pretty much only in England. This is the instrument that Holst wrote for. This is the instrument that Salvation Army bands and British brass bands were being written for up until the 1960s. England had a import embargo on non-English made instruments up until the 1960s. The London Symphony famously came on an American tour in the 50s, and they played concerts in Carnegie Hall. The trombone section met the New York Philharmonic trombone section, which was Gordon Pulis and Louis Van Haney and Alan Ostrander. They loved their con trombones, and so they bought 3 con trombones. They were all confiscated in Heathrow Airport when they got back home in the 50s. Oh, I don't know. Probably the same place. Same place where the Ark of the Covenant is from later Raiders of the Lost Ark, where customs puts things and they never get seen again. So we don't know why the bass trombone was in G. It could be because in England the tenor trombone was in C for a time, and so on the continent when you had the trombone in B flat and the bass trombone in F. If you have a tenor trombone in C and then a bass trombone in G, it preserves that fifth relationship. But the slide is too long. It's almost too long to be able to reach the water key. I can just on an F bass trombone, I can't reach it. You have to put it down between your feet and then hit it like Dorothy clicking her toes to empty the water key. Then there's the slide. So there's the G. You don't hold it by the end here. You don't have any leverage. You choke up on it, okay, until you really need to get all the way out, and then you let it go. And Eldor was writing technical licks in his Cockaigne Overture. I have one of these at home that has a D valve on it, one of 5 that Bluesy and Hawks made, and I'll be donating to that to the center. I used it when I was in the Boston Symphony on the Cockaigne Overture, conducted by Sir Geoffrey Tate, fine conductor, now deceased, and British, and my other tenor trombone colleagues scaled down to narrow bore equipment, and I played this on the Cockaigne Overture. And again, this instrument, like the other small bore tenor trombones, if you're playing in a parade, it has that bark. Okay? Now, this instrument my G bass, this one not so much. This is more of a garden variety instrument. But my G bass has such a beautiful sound. I just love playing it for my own enjoyment. The G bass had several nicknames. One was called the English Rose. Of course, the English Rose, the Tudor Rose, the white and red rose of England, the Tudor dynasty began with Edward VII, combining the houses of several houses, including the House of York. So one house was a red rose, one was a red. They came together. It also had the nickname the Kid Shifter. So you get this bass trombone in the front of a parade and move little kids out of the way, right? I want to end this little talk with an extraordinary instrument.
trombones.
that I talked about
I actually did almost have to pick up a baby this year.
to some of you.
That's
There's,
the other one.
there's an entry about this in my dictionary under Davis Schumann, S-H-U-M-A-N. Davis Schumann, American trombonist, taught at Juilliard, gave the American premiere of the Rimsky-Korsakov Trombone Concerto with the Goldman Band in the early 1950s. He had an idea. So you've heard me talk about posture and the fact that our bodies, put this down for a second. Our bodies are made of hinges. We've talked about this. And that but our bodies are not squares. Our hinges we're not squared off. Our body is the most amazing machine ever invented. So if we just let our arms swing naturally, they don't swing just in parallel like this. Your arms naturally will swing out. And if my big butt wasn't in the way, they'd clap in the back, okay? So we can understand that your arm actually reaches out further off to the side than it does in front. Just take your arm and put it slightly off to the side, straight out, and now move it right in front of you. You can feel the muscle here tighten in the back of your shoulder. You can feel it tighten as you move, and that's pulling your arm back. And so I solved this problem, and let's just take, for instance, a trombone. Many of you have heard me talk about this in lessons. So instead of playing straight out like this, so the slide goes back and forth like this, I slightly turn to the side, okay? So I turn my head, but now my arm is not going out this way, my arm is going out this way. Okay, so I have that little more comfortable feel of movement of my slide. Davis Schumann understood this. Okay, ergonomics, not a new thing. Schumann said, okay, so let me reconfigure the trombone by way of this angle. It's called the angular trombone. This angled bit here, and then an angled bit here for the mouthpiece, so I can play it, the bell going forward, but the slide goes off to the side. Okay.
When did actually no. This is a question for later.
Okay, so here's this. So there's a number of things going on here. So it does have a retaining nut here. It does have a tuning slide. It does have a water key. It's a narrow bore horn. It's 500 bore. What was that?
Is it a reverse tuning slide?
Yes, it is. A reverse tuning slide. So you can see. Yeah, that's like most of your tuning slides. So. First of all, it's narrow bore. Oh, by the way, it also has what's called a kranz, a little metal piece around the bell, which was a feature of many German trombones in the from the Renaissance, through the into the 20th century. So there's a little wire bead in here, and then the kranz goes over that. Okay, so but think about some of the things that we've got going on here. The idea did not catch on. For a lot of reasons. First of all, it's a narrow bore trombone, and professional players won't play narrow bore trombones. Second of all, this is inconvenient for your neighbor. The joke is, whenever Schumann got a dent in his slide and he took it into the repair shop, they straightened the thing out. That's probably just apocryphal. But there's another thing that we have to keep in mind here. When we play the trombones, the slide like this, we have a visual thing with the bell. So how many times when you were young, did you find third or fourth position by putting your thumb out or your index finger? Well, you can't do that right now. In fact, this is basically like playing the trombone with your eyes closed. Now, because I've been playing the trombone for 60 years, okay, I can play this thing in tune because I've spent hours and hours of my life playing the trombone with my eyes closed, because I wanted to just know the feel of where I was going. But just imagine Schumann premiering, the modern premiere, okay, since it was first premiered by a Navy band in Russia with Rimsky-Korsakov himself conducting. It's a project, okay? It doesn't have especially warm sound even. It's not especially beautiful trombone song. Didn't catch on. It was made in 3 grades. This is the lower of the 3 grades. When I saw this come up on eBay about 10 years ago, I had
Got
to
that on
I betcha.
I'm literally gonna camp on there now.
Yep, and I have seen them more recently too. Yeah, yes.
What does this case look like?
Let's see. Yeah, it's got, I'll show you. Oh,
Oh,
it's very
because you
funny.
attach.
It's very funny, actually. I'll show you the case. It's right here. Here's the case.
Mhm.
It's quite nice.
Mhm.
And it's adorable. Although it only has, you don't want a case that only has this kind of latch. Okay, because it tends to open. I keep this in here, in the bell to keep it from moving around. And all of the pieces, yeah, I donated this. Giddings and Webster piece pouch. But what this has is interesting. On the back here,
Yep.
okay, it has this. You can stand up.
Mhm.
Is that adorable or what? So if you don't have that, it'll tip over. Yeah. So put this back.
We should retweet trombone cases back.
So yes, Jake.
I just wonder, like, there's the bent trombone, like the double slide, the valve, all these different trombones, right, that were used for different purposes. But now we have just like the tenor, the bass, and the alto are really commonly used.
Right.
What led to, were these just not efficient, and now we have instruments that can like have multi-purposes?
Yeah,
or,
so
like,
well,
why
yeah.
do we see these more
The
often?
valve trombone was the first to die. Okay, because especially certainly other valve instruments continued to live, but just the idea of taking the perfect instrument that you can play perfectly in tune and having valves, which causes all sorts of problems. So you have a valve instrument. And Ryan knows this as a valve player. As soon as you start adding tubing to an instrument, the pitch is gone. Pitch goes wonky. So 3-valve instrument, very difficult to play in tune. 4th valves can help. Sometimes you have pitch finders that move slides. Adolph Sax had the idea to make valve instruments with 6 valves.
Mhm. With 6.
So here is
The one with the bell for each valve.
yes. So here's
Oh yeah.
invention the 7-bell trombone. Okay, I get my book. Page 132.
Have you ever touched one of those?
Oh, yeah.
before?
Yeah, I
Really?
played one in the museum in Japan.
It's just like I feel like it's such a rare sight.
What I wanted to do in the book, I worked really hard to try to get the rights from the Dr. Seuss estate, so I could include the Hoo Hooper from How the Grinch Stole Christmas, which uses a 7-bell instrument that obviously was a takeoff on Saturday wouldn't give me rights. And come on, please, just tell me at least tell me what the price is so I can figure it out. No, they wouldn't do it. But so Sax, there's 3 valves in the top, 3 valves in the bottom. So there's a separate valve and the open horn, and a separate length of tubing. The valves do not work in combination. Okay, so you can get quote perfect intonation on a valve instrument because you can find various places in various harmonic series in various valves. First position, second, third, fourth, fifth. You could be flat in first, you can play in fifth, so you could do this valve or that valve. It was invented by Sax. His friend Berlioz used it in offstage bands in his Troyan and other operas. There was a class in the Paris Conservatory for the 6-valve trombone for about 30 years, and then it died away. And all that hugely technical repertoire that was written for it, and there was huge technical repertoire, especially by Jules de Messerman, a flute player, is now playable on your phone. Jerry.
What happens if you put a different mute in each of the bells and play chromatic scale?
That would be something. And then you would have a duplex instrument.
Jerry, that's
Yes.
sounding like a master's
What about
thesis
that
right there.
Yeah, so cavalry trombone, another kind of upright trombone that goes down like this. And cavalry trombone, the 6-valve trombone, different places had different names for them. I think I have I'm not sure I have an entry for cavalry trombone, but maybe, no, I don't.
It's the one where each depressed valve is a slide position.
Is a slide, but same thing. But I do have a drawing of one of those. Oh yeah, here it is. Here's the Army Posaune. This is a 3-valve instrument. But the idea that on horseback playing a valve instrument is easier than playing a slide instrument. At least you would have a chance.
Do you believe, like you mentioned how you played some of these horns and BSO concerts and stuff like that. Do you believe that that should be done more often, like playing instruments that the composer intended for the music to be played on?
I passionately believe that. Okay, it's not a one-size-fits-all world. When I was young, growing up, I was born in 1955, so I came of age with the trombone in 1964, and I went to college in 1973. At the time I went to college, we were still using LPs, so CD wasn't invented until about 1984. So using LPs, a lot of things had come over to LP from 78. We talked about this in class the other day. From 78s to 45s to LPs, CDs, now streaming. And you could tell what country the orchestra was from. We used to play Drop the Needle, at our apartment, Drop the Needle. Can you tell the piece? Well, that's the easy part, as quickly as possible. Piece and the composer. Then can you tell the country of the orchestra? And then can you tell what the orchestra is? There's a difference between French oboes, which we use in our modern orchestras, and German oboes, Viennese oboes. There's a difference between French bassoons, which you don't use, and German bassoons. Isn't it interesting how we ended up with German bassoons and French oboes in the modern symphony orchestra? Totally different sounds. British orchestras with G-bass trombones and narrow bore trombones with that distinctive mark. Russian trombones, very, very wide and huge wide vibrato in the school of Russian trombone playing. You could tell all these national styles were very, very distinctive. Now they've all become globalized, Americanized. Before I left the Boston Symphony, I was using the Schmidt bass trombone on Brahms' repertoire, and Norman Bolter was using a Conn 88H, and Ron was using a small bore Yamaha horn. 5 years before I left the orchestra, I had the opportunity for the orchestra to purchase 5 trombones by the German maker Crispy, probably the greatest of all German manufacturers. They were not a set. There was alto, there was 2 tenor trombones, a court posaune, so an F attachment, and then a bass trombone that had a single valve, but you could put into the F attachment a second slide that had another valve in it that you could turn, and it could make the F valve into an E valve. So we had the opportunity to purchase these 5 instruments, extraordinary instruments, for only $20,000 for 5 trombones. And I'll never forget, the manager said, okay, we'll get them on consignment, but you're gonna James Levine was our music director. He said, you're gonna have to get Jimmy to sign off on this. They arrived at Tanglewood while the orchestra was rehearsing the Schumann Rhenish Symphony, Robert Schumann's Rhenish Symphony. No trombones in the first 3 movements. We come on for the famous chorale in the 4th movement. Ron and Norman and I were in the back dressing room, furiously throwing bubble pack everywhere, getting these instruments put together, trying to find 3 trombones that we could play with outstage. Ron took the alto, Norman took one of the straight tenors, I took the bass. We kind of played the chorale 5, 6, 7 times, trying to figure this out. Walked out on stage, and then Jimmy gives the downbeat like this, and we play this opening chorale, and the whole orchestra comes in after the chorale, in the 9th bar, and Jimmy stops and says, "What's that sound?" Silence. So I looked around like. Maestro, we just got these old German trombones, and we're just trying them out. I said, I'd like to have that again. Played it again. Stopped the orchestra. He said, that is the most beautiful sound I've ever heard. They were remarkable instruments. Tyne copied some of their instruments from these old crispy trombones. I think playing different instruments is interesting for me. They all feel different. You have to do different things. Obviously, I'm not demonstrating them. They sort of in peak playing, condition for them or for me right now, just in this demonstration. But there's such variety in music and music making that's today has gotten so homogenized and so perfected. And so I still have 500 LPs at home. I love my LPs of Russian orchestras and English orchestras. Oh, there's something about listening to an Algar symphony with 3 narrow bore British trombones. and when I played my G bass trombone on the Elgar Cockayne Overture for Sir Geoffrey Tate, he said, you know, I went into his dressing room at intermission of the rehearsal to confess, and he said, you know, I said, Maestro, I'm playing this G bass trombone. He said, oh, I knew there was something. I haven't heard that sound in years. Fully wonderful, fantastic. Do it again. So, so there was a article written in the Historic Brass Society journal a number of years ago by my friend Gavin Dixon, titled "Farewell to the Kid Shifter." It's the history of the G bass drum. And it's a photograph of Sir Geoffrey and myself sitting in the conductor's dressing room at Tango.
So is it like a collective effort? Like obviously the sound quality of an older drum is different than what we have now, right? So the whole brass section is playing a new instrument, you're playing an older one.
Yeah.
Does that match?
You'd like to try to scale down. If you're going to use small bore British trombones, you'd like the trumpets to use slightly narrower bore instruments, but you want the whole trombone section to be on the same page. So we were all using German trombones or German-ish trombones. Now we use all the modern instruments and things like that. But yeah, I think it does help if things are relatively matched. But I will say this about those crispy trombones. We were doing a rehearsal of Brahms' Fourth, and the conductor was the music director of the city of Cologne in Germany. The crispy bass trombone was engraved Gerstner Orchester Stadt Cologne, so the Gerstner Orchestra of the city of Cologne. So at some point, that orchestra had owned this instrument, and then they'd sold it, and now it was owned by the Boston Symphony. So at intermission, the conductor comes by me, and I stop. I said, Maestro, I just thought you might like to know that, we're playing old German trombones by Crispy, and this instrument, look, it's engraved. It was owned by your orchestra. And he looked at me, and he just shook his head. He said, my orchestra in Cologne is playing American trombones, and I come to Boston, and you're playing German trombones. So there you go. All right, our time's up here. It's a fire drill just going through these instruments. I love, as you can tell, when you look through my book, I love these instruments. I just love learning about them. I love playing them. I'm blessed to have wonderful relationships with museum curators and museums around the world. I play on audio and video guides for about a dozen museums around the world on various instruments: trombones, serpents, ophicleides, bass horns. I love that I can have access to instruments in museums that not everybody can have, but it's just a real blessing because it's just of my interest in them. So here we have this amazing resource with the Sousa Archives and Center for American Music here, right in your own backyard. And these instruments can be studied, touched, held, played. It's a wonderful resource we have. So Scott, I want to thank you for stewarding this great collection here and inviting us here.